So can we talk now? We've talked enough about the Cubs.
No, I think we should just end the show. The Cardinals. I
Yeah.
don't. I mean,
I
I'm
mean,
not
well,
really
first,
interested in the rest of
b-
it.
before we end the show, let's talk about what the Cardinals have done this offseason. And
Hey, can I start off that
that's about it. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to start off that conversation with this little nugget. Did you know that the Cardinals are one of six teams in the major leagues to not to sign a Major League Baseball free agent this season?
I did not know that until just now.
So
It does
pitcher,
not surprise it does not surprise me because as I'm looking at Fangraphs, and I told you I've been paying attention to the St. Louis Cardinals, but to be honest with you, ever since the Nolan Arenado rejected the trade and all this nonsense about him, I think he posted something on social media implying that he wanted to play for the Dodgers, and I can't help but think, why would the Dodgers want you to play for, like, don't the Dodgers have like three good third basemen? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know honestly enough about the Dodgers really to know their. I guess I could pull it up right now, but you get the point. Like
yeah.
are you even good enough anymore to start for the Dodgers on a regular basis right now? Max Muncy is going to play, or is projected to play third base for them, and I don't know.
And
They
he's a beast, by the way. Max Muncy is a beast.
yeah, he's a really good player,
Yeah.
and Nolan Arenado has been an average player. His WRC plus is 102,
Do you
which
remember
is
how
pretty
excited
average.
you remember how excited you were when Nolan Arenado was coming to St. Louis?
Well, they
And
well they gave
Goldschmidt?
up hardly anything to, yeah, those two, and it really is the end of an era, and an era that the Cardinals, Cardinals fans really thought the Cardinals could compete, for not just to win divisions but to win World Series. And I'll say, initially it was good. Initially, that 2022. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but Paul Goldschmidt won the MVP, and Nolan Arenado in 2022. I just mentioned WRC plus, or yeah, WRC plus in 2022. Well, I'm going to mention a different stat now because I can't see WRC plus now, but OPS plus 151, which is unbelievable. He hit 30 home runs, 103 RBIs in 2022, and he finished third in the MVP race. Nolan Arenado did, but ever since that 2022 season, 2023 OPS plus 108, and this past year in 2024 OPS plus 101. So he's been much closer to an average player. I know he gives you a lot defensively, although that's also been slipping, but 2023, 26 home runs, 93 RBIs, and then this past year, 16 home runs and 71 RBIs. So the saga with Nolan Arenado and the fact that the Cardinals are probably eventually going to trade him is all a salary dumping move because the Cardinals are not going to get much for him. Sure, the name has cachet. He can play plus defense at third base if that's what you need, but the salary just doesn't make any sense for any team unless the Cardinals are going to take the majority or at least a good portion of that contract. So this whole trade situation, it's got to happen because the Cardinals really need to play Nolan Gorman at third base. If this is really a youth movement, then that's what they need to do. And that puts the Cardinals in a terrible position if they're trying to extract as much value out of Nolan Arenado as they possibly can because they're not in a good position to begin with the contract and just with the contract alone. But getting back to the original point, Mike, it started off great. And then the Cardinals, Albert Pujols had one of the most magical seasons I can remember any player having in the history of baseball. I mean, can you imagine going back to your former team where you really made your hay as a player? And I know he had some decent years with the Angels, but nothing like what he had with the Cardinals. And having the kind of season that he had, playing with Adam Wainwright and Yadier Molina and The Last Dance and an MVP candidate and another MVP candidate, and then getting knocked out in the first round to the Philadelphia Phillies because your manager mismanaged that one game. You could really point back to that game as being the genesis of the Ollie Marmol hatred amongst Cardinal fans. You really could.
Uh-huh.
So like that
Is there
was
a
just
hatred? Is there a hatred?
oh yeah. Yeah, it's that like the Cardinals fans want him gone, and that's a whole nother conversation.
Wow, I didn't
The
realize that was so.
Cardinals well John Mozeliak, this will be his last year, but yeah, I've never seen in the history of the St. Louis Cardinals anybody like nobody was saying fire Mike Matheny, at least not that I remember. I don't think anybody was saying fire Schill like chants or
Right.
screaming it from the fan. Like every time I go to a Cardinals baseball game, multiple times from multiple different people, fire Ollie, get him out of
Wow.
here. Yeah, like
Oh,
they're done. Like Cardinal, and it's really not his fault at all because the starting like you could blame most of this on John Mozeliak's just terrible managing of the farm system and of the starting pitching rotation because that's really where the Cardinals have again they haven't been developing their own starting pitching, and if you're not willing to pay or overpay for starting pitching in Major League Baseball, you're going to have a problem. Now they did sign Sonny Gray, and that's worked out really well for the Cardinals, but Steven Matz has not worked out. Miles Michaelis has not worked out, and to this point, Eric Fetty's been okay, but at this point, as a Cardinals fan, what I want them to do is to make a decision, is to commit to something. And it feels like they are committing to doing nothing.
hey,
And that is a choice in and of itself. We all know committing to doing absolutely nothing is the most frustrating position possible because if this really is, and they won't say the words, if it really is a rebuild, then there are some pretty obvious trade candidates. And I'm not even talking about Nolan Arenado. The obvious trade candidates are if you want, fine. If you want to keep Sonny Gray and Wilson Contreras, that's fine. I have no problem keeping those guys. But Eric Fetty, who's on a 1 year, has just one more year left on his deal and would be a nice, rotation piece for some team. Ryan Helsley, probably the most obvious trade candidate in the history of trade candidates, coming off his best season as a player, as a closer, as a lockdown closer, and oh by the way, he's 30 years old, gonna be 31 by the end of the season. I mean, if you could get rid of Miles Michaelis, like if you could trade him for a laundry machine, I would do it just to dump that contract. There are some pretty obvious names that you need to be trading away, in my opinion. I think Helsley and Fetty are at the top of that list. Obviously, Nolan Arenado needs to be traded. Paul Goldschmidt has already signed with the Yankees. But if this really is a youth movement, and I like a lot of the Cardinals' young players and their potential, but you have to figure out what you have at some point. You can't just keep Tink Hence in the minor leagues forever. And the Cardinals, they're 20th on this list here that I referenced earlier on Bleacher Report with Tink Hence, J.J. Weatherholtz, Quinn Matthews as tier one prospects. But you have to figure out what you have in Quinn Matthews. At some point, you have to figure out what you have in Tink Hence. At some point, Tekoa Roby, Jimmy Crooks. The Cardinals have actually really good depth in their minor leagues at catcher. So, and Thomas Sajaci needs to play this year if this really is a youth movement. But I think the frustrating thing is you want them to pick a lane. You want them to do something. They're obviously not going to be serious contenders, at least with payroll, because they're cutting payroll. So let's see the young kids play. If we're really going to see the young kids play, let's play Nolan Gorman at third base every day and see what happens. Let's play Jordan Walker in the outfield every day and see what happens. Let's see what Victor Scott can do in the outfield or as a bench piece. And I like the approach with what they're projected to do with their bench because it's Sajaci, it's Siani, it's Right now, Nolan Gorman is projected to be. I don't see a world where he's just a bench utility player, but like let's see what we have, and maybe we can uncover some diamonds in the rough. Like, what do you have to lose? The only way this doesn't happen is if you keep all these, like, if you just fill the rotation with guys that are not going to be on the team long term, and it's just driving me insane. Like, why are we not doing anything? It's almost like Mozeliak just doesn't want to mess up in his last year and make another awful trade.
So pitchers and catchers report in less than a month. And to your point, and because I like to see you get your ire up, not
Yep.
only not only are the Cardinals one of 6 teams not to sign a free agent to a fully guaranteed contract, but they have yet to make a trade to start the transition period. That
Yeah.
like to your point, they are doing nothing. Now, I do want to ask you about this though, because
Mm-hmm.
while you say they're doing nothing, if I can find my deal here, let's see. The Cardinals have agreed to terms with 3 of their players: Ryan
Yep.
Helsley, Jojo Romero, and John King.
Yep.
Lars Nootbaar, Brendan Donovan, Andre Palante likely headed to arbitration. So it's not that they're doing nothing. They're
Yeah.
they're holding the line. It sounds like they're holding the line, third in the
Yeah.
National League Central, and we're okay.
Well, yeah, and the only way that there's upside to this situation is if you play the younger players. We have a reasonably good idea if Nolan Arenado plays third base in 2025 of what we're going to get. He's going to play good defense. He's probably going to hit somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 home runs, maybe drive in 70 or 80 runs, but he's just not like, I guess there could be a resurgence, and maybe the Cardinals are thinking to themselves, well, like maybe we get that resurgence and then we can trade him because the contract does get better over time. The Cardinals will be on the hook for $21 million this year in 2025, and then it goes down 16 million and then 15 million. So it's not an unbearable contract in the way that some people think it is, but it's still a lot of money, and you need to make room for some of these younger players. If like I think the player that's most affected if the Cardinals don't move off of Arenado is obviously Nolan Gorman, because like you start to look at the Cardinals and their team. Okay, Mason Wynn is slotted in at shortstop. Wilson Contreras is apparently going to play first base. Brendan Donovan is probably going to play second, although I think he could play third as well. Uh, you know,
Wait. Did you say Contreras at first?
yeah, you didn't know this?
I had not heard this yet.
Yeah, Wilson Contreras is going to play first base for the Cardinals now that Goldschmidt is gone, and that I actually like it. It opens up catcher for Ivan Herrera, who was one of our better hitters.
Wasn't Jordan Walker a first baseman?
No, he was a third baseman in the
Okay, I had the
minors,
wrong
and
one.
they moved him to outfield with
Yeah.
no outfield instructor in the minor leagues. But that's a whole nother separate conversation of the Cardinals' ineptitude over the last several years. But yeah, so you're just and if Nolan Arenado has to play third base. My point is, where's Nolan Gorman going to play if you want to play Brendan Donovan every day at second, which is where Nolan Gorman was playing? He has to be a DH. Oh, wait a second. If he's a DH, Alec Burleson is probably going to DH some. I would assume Jordan Walker is probably going to DH some. So it limits what you can do with a player like Nolan Gorman, who you really need to figure out if you can fix him. And I think he's fixable, but you have to give him the opportunity to play every day, even as frustrating as that might be at times. And I don't see that happening if Nolan Arenado is on the team. So that's, I think, a big deal, and why the Cardinals are in just a terrible situation trying to trade him away. And like the Cardinals just, I feel, do this thing where it's like, okay, if we're not going to get enough value we're going to sit on our hands and do nothing. But you're kind of in a position where you can't do nothing. Like you're kind of in a situation where in essence, you're not going to get a lot. You kind of just have to take what you can get and to make way for some of these younger guys. And the same is true with the rotation. Eric Fetty, Miles Michaelis, and Steven Match, you know who they are. You don't know who Tink Hence is. You don't necessarily know what you have in Quinn Matthews. These guys need opportunity and they need reps. And you also need more pieces that you can develop in the minor leagues. So I don't know, Mike. I don't understand the inaction, to be honest with you. I've always been a guy who's believed in being proactive as an organization, and the Cardinals are in a mess of their own creating, and the only way to get out of it is to start making moves, to which point they haven't done that. So I don't really know what else to say. I feel like it's that meme. I don't know if you've seen it online where it's that guy poking the something. It just says do something.
Right.
And that's how I feel about the St. Louis Cardinals right now, because it's obvious to me and a lot of other Cardinals fans the situation that you're in. Now you just need to make something happen. And to be fair, they did have a trade with Houston, which Nolan Arenado blocked. For what reason, I have no idea. And it like the no trade clause does limit what they can, again, do with Nolan Arenado. There's every possibility that there are teams that just don't want him. Like that's also true. So it makes it even trickier. So to be fair to the Cardinals, in that situation, like that's fair. But when it comes to these other valuable pieces, you can't tell me that you couldn't have gotten two or three top prospects for Ryan Helsley right now. That's right. The most obvious move that needs to be made, in my opinion. And I know some Cardinals fans are not going to agree with me, but he's a 30-year-old closer. I've seen this story play out before, and coming off his best season, his value's not going to get any higher.
And do you think the Cardinals are just waiting with him for the trade? I mean, waiting for July, hoping that he comes in and has continues where he left off, and then
that is such a scary proposition, because what if he gets hurt? What if he?
I know.
I don't know. But how much higher can his value get, Mike? I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But whatever. I'm
not. But what is it? What have the Cardinals done that has made sense over the last several years? That's my question. What moves have they made that have really Hey, we want to, and all of this to say, the Cubs and the Cardinals finished with the identical records last year.
Yeah.
We're kind of making it sound like, well, the Cardinals they really suck. And well, that's where the Cubs are. I mean, we're on the same plane in the National League Central. Let's really talk about it. Like, that's where we're at. The Cubs have made moves during the offseason. That's the difference right now, right? We're going to have a different team. What your team is going to be pretty much the same, right?
Well, it's because the inaction actually makes you wonder, are the Cardinals actually talking themselves into, maybe we can win the Central? Well, what if Steven Matz, is healthy for the first time in his whole life? What if Miles Michaelis has a bounce back season? What if Eric Fetty is as good as he was before we traded for him? Sonny Gray. What if we get something out of one of these younger guys? In our bullpen, they lost. I can't even think of his name. I think the Phillies signed him, Kittredge. So he's gone. Goldschmidt's gone. But for the most part, you look at the lineup and you go, yeah, that's pretty similar to what they were rolling out last year. And I would argue the bench is better because you don't have Matt Carpenter and Brendan Crawford on the bench for God knows what reason they brought those guys in for. You have Siani, who's a nice player, projected to be on the bench. Victor Scott, projected to be with the big club. And he's I mean, at the very least, he can steal some bases for you as a pinch runner. She said JC is a very interesting piece. Pedro Pages is a nice defensive backup catcher. And then you look at the bullpen. You know, Ryan Fernandez had a nice year. Ryan Helsley, we all know what what he can do. Jojo Romero was good last year. So there's some pieces here that you go, are the Cardinals really talking themselves into, can we be a contender? Because to your point, last year they won 83 games with a lot going wrong. And I honestly hope that's not the case, but because I would like to see the Cardinals rebuild their minor league system and start that process this year as opposed to waiting another year. And I would assume Kyle Bloom, that's what he would want as well. And who knows, maybe they are waiting for the trade deadline for some of these moves. Maybe the value just isn't there yet. I don't know, but like I would like to see this process start now because in my estimation, the Cardinals don't match up to what the Cubs have or the Brewers have or maybe even the Reds have in the division. So
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that you say that because with two teams with identical records and with the moves that we made, I remember reading a stat, or I don't know, not really a stat, but the Cubs with Ian Happ, Dansby Swanson, and Kyle Tucker have 3 first-round draft picks from the 2015 draft, and so there's this balance between great kind of veteran players, and prospects and bringing them along. And that's something else that I like with the Cubs. I don't know how your feelings on that with the Cardinals are. There would seem to be a similar thing with Arenado and, some of the veteran guys that you've had around for a while, plus your youth movement. And maybe that's just something that happens in baseball, I mean,
yeah.
this is how the business is run. And so it's really nothing to be talking about, but it's who the people are, I guess. That's the big thing.
Yeah, and another reason why they have to trade Arenado is, do you think he's really going to be the happiest guy in the locker room
Oh my God.
every day with all those younger players? I mean, he was not really a leader in the clubhouse to begin with, and now all of his buddies are gone. I mean, I can't. Obviously, I'm not in the locker room, but you would think you would be around all these other players, and I'm just gonna list you the ages of these guys. So Nolan Arenado's going to be 34 years old. Wilson Contreras, I guess, is 32, going to be 33. But then Mason Wynn, 22 years old. Alec Burleson, 26. Brendan Donovan, 28. Lars Nootbaar, 27. Jordan Walker, 22. Ivan Herrera, 24. Victor Scott, 23. It's a lot of younger players. And then you go to the bench. Pedro Pages, 26. Gorman, 24. Sajasi, 22. Siani, 25. Who Siani feels like he's been around the league forever. So it's a lot of younger players. There's a few, like there's Contreras who's in his 30s, and then that's it. Like
Yeah.
it's like it really feels like the big ball to drop is Nolan Arenado, and not to harp on this forever, but I believe the Cardinals have to trade him, and it puts them in a terrible situation with his no trade clause and the fact that teams know that they have to trade Nolan Arenado to make room for some of these younger players. So it's just the Cardinals are in a tough spot, but it's a spot of their own making with a lot of this stuff. So anyway, and you remember all those years I was screaming for the Cardinals like to pay for a starting pitcher to pair with Adam Wainwright when Adam Wainwright was still in the prime of his career, and they just, there's always half measures, and they would never make that big trade or make that big signing, and it was just, I always felt like for years the Cardinals just needed one more guy in that starting rotation to go into a playoff series with, and the Cardinals were making it work in 2022 with I think it was Jose Quintana was their opening day starter. And where's Jose Quintana now? I think he's with the Mets, but yeah, they just didn't have the horses ever in with starting pitching. And you look at when they won the World Series, they had Adam Wainwright and Chris Carpenter,
Right.
like
Right.
as their duo, and Chris Carpenter really was the like just a stud. So
Yeah.
we'll see. It's the Cardinals season is going to be an interesting one. It's going to be a season of figuring things out, hopefully. And I do believe a Nolan Arenado trade is going to happen at some point. But
You feel like that's looming.
yeah, I do.
Yeah. I've heard Boston Red Sox. I mean, well, I think he came out and said, he wouldn't block that to play for the
Yeah,
Red Sox or whatever.
yeah, and yeah,
But
and so yeah,
I think the question remains though, like who's going to want it? I mean
yeah,
that I like, and sometimes you feel that way about guys, right? I mean, you talk about the
hmm
ages of your players and that sort of thing. And it's interesting when I look at least last year's fan graphs. That's the best place to find ages on there. Dansby Swanson at 30 was the aging veteran. You know, and
yeah,
and and that's okay. I mean,
yeah,
Ian Happ's only 29. Nico Horner's 27. These guys have got a few years ahead of them, I think. So that's something to look forward to as a Cubs fan, anyway.
yeah. So we'll see, but yeah, the Cardinals inaction is very frustrating because they definitely have some trade chips. They're just not willing to trade them away.
Yeah.